Well, good evening. I'm Cynthia Greaves, and I serve on the Board of Directors for the Chamber of Commerce here in Mountain View. And we'd like to welcome you all here to our state candidate forum presented by the Chamber. So thank you all for making time to come hear our candidates. As we prepare for the upcoming election, it's our hope that this evening's conversation will help answer some of the questions to help you make your decisions. I know I don't get all my information off of signs and ads, and this is a perfect forum to learn the details that make you an informed voter. I'd like to remind the candidates that the audience this is not meant to be a debate, but a forum for an exchange of information. And there will be an opportunity for you, if you have questions, to pass them up to me, and I can pose them to the candidates as well. So there are two parts to this evening. After we hear the candidates for our state senate, then we'll have a short break, and then we'll be able to hear from our candidates for our state assembly. So if you have any questions, you'll see a couple of our Chamber of Commerce volunteers that have cards. Just raise your hand and they'll bring you one, and then they'll bring the question on up to me. So everyone gets a chance to ask a question if they wish. So the forum is being recorded by our local community television, KMVT, and it'll be loaded to the Chamber's website soon as well. So for those of you at home, you don't get to ask the questions, but hopefully you'll still get lots of great information to help you make your vote. Additionally, we'll be doing some live tweeting. Heidi from the Chamber will be doing some tweeting. If you're following on Twitter tonight, follow under hashtag MVForum, all one word. And you can also always follow the Chamber under @ChamberMV, also one word. We have a couple of dignitaries with us here this evening. We just missed our incoming chair, Ken Rosenberg, who's off running a committee, but we do have David Jude. David, raise your hand. He's the past chair of the board of the Chamber of Commerce. And we also have Lonnie Gray, who's a board member, along with me. Thank you for coming tonight. So first I'd like to also introduce our candidates, and I'm going to let them have a minute to introduce themselves. First we have both Jerry Hill and Sally Lieber. So Jerry, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Cynthia, but is this 1 minute or the 3 minute that we have to start? This is 3 minutes, is that correct?
This is your, pardon me, I'm supposed to do the rules first. So we begin with your opening remarks, which is 3 minutes, you're correct. And then there are rules of the evening that each candidate has 2 minutes to answer each question. So we encourage you to be concise. And then our timekeeper, Alicia, who's seated here in the audience, will give you a 20-second warning and a stop notice, because we have to keep to a fairly rigid schedule, okay? So with that, yes, you have your 3 minutes to introduce yourself. Jerry?
Very good. Thank you, Cynthia. And thank you to the Chamber, the Mountain View Chamber of Commerce for facilitating this event tonight. And also I want to commend the residents of Mountain View and the city staff and the city council for the great work they've done on Mountain View 2030. What a great collaboration and a 4-year effort that came together to kind of create the vision for Mountain View in the next many years. And so I just want to congratulate the city on doing that. I live in the city of San Mateo. I have I've been married for a number of years and have a daughter, and I just became a grandfather in the last year. I have a 1-year-old granddaughter, which is very special to me. I grew up in San Francisco. My father, as I grew up, was kind of known as the mayor of Hearst Avenue in San Francisco. He was the fellow that people would go to, people would come to kind of solve their problems and help them out in the community, work with the city to try and be that go-between to make things in the community and the neighborhood work correctly. Well, in the city of San Mateo, I became the president of my neighborhood homeowners association, and with the same goal in mind to try and help the community. I did that as we fought some major developments in the city of San Mateo. I tried to look at quality of life issues, because to me, quality of life is important. Once it's lost, it's never regained. It's lost forever. I'm a small business owner. It gives me a kind of a balanced perspective of what it takes to run an economy and what it takes to operate in a community. I belong to 3 local chambers of commerce in this county of San Mateo. I was a city council member for 7 years, mayor for 1, and a county supervisor for 10 years in local government. It gave me that perspective and that knowledge that I think is important in that balance. As a county supervisor, I was able to facilitate, and tonight in the city of South San Francisco, 90 homeless individuals have a place to stay because of the efforts that I made. Also in San Mateo County, every child from birth to 18 years of age has health care at no cost to the taxpayers that I helped facilitate when I was a county supervisor. I was also a member of of the California Air Resources Board. My environmental credentials are strong, and I was able to work on the implementation of AB 32. In the Assembly, there I have distinguished myself with a 95% of my bills, 95% of the bills that I've authored have passed with bipartisan support. I work well with people and build collaborations. I've worked hard on the Amazon tax bill, which, as you know, takes effect this Saturday, which now will equalize the tax and the work that we have in terms of brick and mortar stores will now be on the same par, and Amazon will as well. I chair the Select Committee on Biotechnology to sustain the growth in that industry. And now as I come further south, I brought SunEdison, a solar company from Baltimore, Maryland to headquarter in Belmont, California with 600 new jobs. It was an effort I had to recognize and work hard to sustain Silicon Valley's innovation economy. That's a goal of mine, and that's something that I'm looking forward to working on to create more jobs. Thank you very much. Looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Jerry. And next we're going to hear from Sally Lieber.
Thank you. Well, I want to first thank the Chamber and the Chamber's board members who are here tonight. For the community members who are here who may not be a part of the Chamber, our Chamber has a really interesting mission here in Mountain View and really has their work cut out for them, balancing the interests and the voices of some of the world's largest corporations with the mom and pop businesses that are really the backbone of our community. And they've been able to navigate those relationships with civility and for the benefit of all concerned and for the good of the community. I really think of Mountain View as a hometown. It's also a place that has never shied away from the big issues. And I think that we've taken on some of the most important environmental issues of our time and really created the kind of quality of life that has been a springboard for so many startups and for so much innovation. I think you only need to go in the Red Rock Cafe on an average afternoon to see what innovation is all about and to see the small companies coming together that may one day be the size that Google was when it was on Castro Street or up above the restaurant in Palo Alto. And they may be our next company that will change the world. This is a very important political year for California. It's very important that you take a role in it and that you be voters in this year. And I think two of the issues that are most pivotal and impactful for California right now are education and the environment. California has not had an easy time of it in the past several years. Our mechanisms for funding our state's programs have left us really in a state that can best be described as a pinball game where the ball bounces off various obstructions and either falls in the right area or not. And I think that we need to take a much more deliberative approach to the basics in our state and towards looking forward to a future that will benefit all Californians. I'm looking forward to working in the state Senate with the businesses that are here in Mountain View throughout the South Bay. I think that those are collaborations that will absolutely lead us into the future. So again, I want to thank you each for taking the time to be here and thank the Chamber for the work that it does and look forward to your questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Sally. Now we're going to enter the portion of the evening with questions. Some of them have been put together by the Chamber itself and with Chamber members, and others came in via email, and we have some from the audience as well. So I'll pose the question, and each candidate will have 2 minutes, a strict 2 minutes to respond. So we'll jump right in and say, Sally, we'll start with you. If elected, how will you seek the input of the business community on public policy matters facing our community?
I think one of the most important ways is working through the programs that the Chamber provides, and that some of the larger umbrella groups like the Silicon Valley Leadership Group provide. One of the things that's very, very important to me is to make it an effective time when members of the business community come up to Sacramento. And when I served in the State Assembly, I was very pleased to have our office be a home for people to come into during their day on the Hill and be able to be as effective as they moved throughout the building. I think that having a business advisory split into the various sectors of our economy is very important. It's hard to have a catch-all group that includes very small and very large businesses. And so segmenting that up in a way that gives voice to all of the folks and is respectful of their time, I think is something that's very, very important. One of the things to me that's been exciting about campaigning in such a large district, and I think there are 29 cities and major unincorporated areas in the state Senate district, has been discovering some of the smaller independent businesses that are out there. And I think we could do a much better job in California of serving our independent businesses and highlighting what it is that they do and making state government work for them. All too often, I hear from really valuable members of the community that navigating our state's bureaucracies is really a nightmare, that they can never get a hold of the same person twice to ask their questions of, to get technical support. And so we have to do a much better job at the executive level in California of focusing on the businesses that serve our communities.
Thank you. And Jerry, would you like for me to repeat the question?
Sure, please. Thank you.
So if you are elected, how will you seek the input of the business community on public policy matters facing our community?
Well, it's just coincidentally tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in my office in San Mateo, there will be a small business roundtable group that are meeting to discuss just those very issues on policy and some of the concerns that they have related to legislation and California. I've also, since I mentioned earlier, I'm a member of 3 chambers of commerce, and participating with them, they're never afraid to let me know what's on their minds and some of the local issues that affect them on a daily basis, which kind of affects all of us. And it's important to be part of that. The Silicon Valley Leadership Group has a Silicon Valley caucus where all of the legislators that represent the area come together and meet. And by the way, Carl Guardino, who is the president or the executive of Silicon Valley Leadership Group, is endorsed my campaign. We have worked together with them, looking at the issues that really work for larger businesses. But I look at there's a real differentiation in California between the chambers of commerce, the local chambers, and the state California Chamber of Commerce. They're not as connected, not as interested in the small, I believe, in the small businesses in California. And so it's my goal to work with the smaller businesses because that's really the bread and butter. I'm providing the most jobs for California. They provide the most the resources and really are our mainstay. So it's important to outreach and to be part of the local chambers and the local business community. But and as I mentioned, with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group and others, we've been able to come together. And in Sacramento, the issues are brought forward by a lot of the groups that, whether they're industry groups that are represented by, that the business industry and particular business groups have that are very active in representing their interests. So to me, it's very important to listen and participate and be part of the discussion with business on an ongoing basis.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We're going to turn the focus now to issues of housing. So just keep it going back and forth, Jerry. We'll start with you this time. What will you do to support the local government, help the local government meet the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, the RHNA, affordable housing requirements, especially in light of the elimination of the housing set aside and the Palmer decision?
Well, it's really challenging now with the redevelopment, the elimination of redevelopment and the housing. It's one of the goals that I have. In fact, at the last days of the legislature, I was fortunate enough to sit on a task force for the redesign and kind of the recreation of redevelopment in California, because there's been some great benefits, and Mountain View is a perfect example of the success of redevelopment and what it can bring to a community. One of the issues is that to try and take that next step to provide the opportunity for economic development, for housing, without affecting education, because that has been, either we can do it with some tax increment, which I think is the best way. We have opportunities that are going forward with infrastructure banking and investments that are solutions in that way. But to me, the solution is to do some type of tax increment financing that can go for direct economic development and for affordable housing. That, to me, is the main issue. And looking at the Palmer decision to see if there are ways that we can work through that. We need affordable housing. This area is, as we all recognize and know, is short on affordable housing. And it's certainly my goal to continue the effort to provide the funds necessary to supplement and to incentivize affordable housing in the community.
I'll repeat the question for you. Pardon me, Sally.
It's okay.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Please
Thanks.
continue.
Some things that I think that we need to do in terms of housing. I think that we ought to provide incentives for the communities that are going ahead and taking the steps that they need to in terms of planning to provide workforce housing for California. And we need workforce housing of just about all types. I think that the only buildings that are, well, there are no developments between here or San Jose and San Francisco that provide very small workforce housing for people of very limited means. In Mountain View, we were successful in putting in our single room occupancy development for affordable housing. And we need to, in a way, reverse engineer what communities used to have. It used to be the case that every community of a somewhat substantial size had a YMCA and a YWCA with small rooms that were just a clean, quiet place to be with a lock on the door for people that were part of the workforce at the lower levels. And we need to get back to the point of having those options available and having options available for supportive housing for people with developmental disabilities in our community to be able to stay in our communities. As you know, it wasn't fully alluded to in the question, but our RHNA numbers, as they're called, are basically the numbers of housing units that are needed for all the various regions of our state. And our local agency that divvies them up for local communities is ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments. This has not been an easy process, and I think our state needs to do more to encourage collaborations between communities and to reward those communities that do have access for affordable housing.
Excellent. Thank you both. Next, we're going to turn to one of the hot topics in transportation. And Sally, we'll start with you. The electrification of Caltrans will finally happen with money tied in the high-speed rail. In your opinions, what are your thoughts of high-speed rail and its impact on the state revenue and the local communities?
I was a real proponent of the concept of high-speed rail. I think it still has merit for our state overall. We have about the same amount of population and the same land mass and same distribution of kinds of geography that Spain does. So I think we could benefit in the future from high-speed rail. Unfortunately, the deal that was recently approved by the legislature is an awful deal for California. And it is doing high-speed rail in the most expensive way possible. I think it merits another look. I think it merits going back to a vote of the people. And I think that we ought to be driven by really listening to the local communities and what the impact of the grade separations would be. For communities like Mountain View, it means a high-speed rail train coming in that's either elevated or trenched, taking out part of our historic blocks, and would have a major impact on our community. And it's frankly that way all up and down the peninsula. And there are small businesses all up and down the peninsula that are very close to the right-of-way. I know that the folks who are currently in the legislature worked to get language into this legislation that said that the high-speed rail train would have to stay in the Caltrain right-of-way, but there is nothing that binds a future legislature, including the legislature coming back in January, from making changes to that. And I think we need to take a step back and really look at the impacts from to our communities. We're proposing to spend over $60 billion to get $3 billion in federal funds. And our California bond repayment under our state's constitution comes right off the top of our budget before we pay for education, healthcare, or any other state needs.
Thank you, Sally.
Cynthia, thank you. We have taken the first step towards high-speed rail. That first step is an investment in California bond money of $4.6 billion is all. No one voted for, no one wanted to. I could never support $68 billion for high-speed rail. But what we're getting for that $4.6 billion is $1 billion for Northern California, electrification of Caltrain, which will provide and take 40 to 50,000 more cars off the road every day. We get a whole new fleet of BART trains. BART trains are the oldest trains in the nation for a high-speed rail system. We get the Amtrak system going from San Jose, the Capital Corridor, will speed up by, I think, about 15 minutes more by the new improvements there. We get $1 billion for Northern California, which is something that will electrify, which will make it safer, cleaner, and faster on Caltrain. We also, the same amount goes to Southern California, about $1 billion. 20% of the money will come to Northern California. The money in the Valley, which is about $2.4 billion of our bond money, matched with $3.3 billion of federal money, will get us improvements in that Amtrak system today. The cost benefit of this initial small investment does not tie us to any long-term investment in the future, because each investment has to be made independently. And this is why I supported this move in this vote, because of the great benefit for Caltrain and for us on the peninsula, and for what it will do in the future for us, and not with any anticipation of providing $68 billion. I authored the language that, and was able to get in the bill the language that will protect Caltrain for the future, and the understanding and the agreement and the contract that will be made between the High-Speed Rail Authority and Caltrain to provide and guarantee the two-track system and the blended approach for this area. That's a guarantee, and that's something in contract. That's what we're looking for the future. But it's more importantly, it's what we will get for this, for the Valley. That's the key issue for this initial first step, and there doesn't have to be a second step. We win either way.
Excellent. Thank you. One that's in the front of my mind is on the November ballot are propositions number 30 and 38. Jerry, we'll start with you. What impact do you anticipate Proposition 38 will have if it passes over the governor's Proposition 30?
Well, the difference between the two propositions, as I understand them, is that the Proposition 38 is directly a income tax adjustment and a higher rate of income tax for the vast majority of people in California, whereas Proposition 30 is the sales tax as well as the small incremental increase in income tax for those over $250,000 a year. The main difference in the distinction, and the reason that I've been supportive of the governor's proposal, is that it was created in a way that would, if it were to pass, then the money that would use and be allocated in that formula will not add to the Prop 98 limit, which means that we can use those funds to balance the budget. If Proposition 38 passes, there's a requirement that would require us to make additional cuts. Even though there's additional funds coming in, we would have to make additional cuts to the tune of, I think, $2 to $3 billion in the budget. It's a minimum $2 to $3 billion in our budget as it goes forward. So it doesn't solve the problem today. It gives us a solution in the future, and the money would definitely, more of it would go to education. But in saying that, the solution that the governor's previous budget that we passed in June, the budget that he proposed, the benefit of that is if you extend that out for the next 5 years, we will see that education will be getting about $15 to $20 billion more that in paying back the money that was deferred from K through 12 education before. And that's really crucial, because the stability of the budget as we go out over the next few years is what we created in this budget. And the governor was very adamant that the cuts would be made this year in order to provide those funds next year and in the future.
Excellent. Thank you. Sally?
Well, one of my goals when I left the legislature was to see a simple majority budget vote. and that was approved by the voters as Proposition 22. And I think it has improved our budget process. Now we need to do the other side of that, which is budget transparency. And the reason that I bring this up in the context of Propositions 30 and 38 is that I think that we need to give the public the confidence that comes from being able to see the state budget. And on a myriad of different issues, the legislature in a term-limited environment is not able to provide adequate oversight. And the fact is that our budget committees in the legislature see budget change proposals, requests for more money or less money, in the unlikely event that a state agency asks for less money, and not the full operating budgets for the agencies and departments that they oversee. That's frankly why we had the recent situation with the Parks Department, was that our budgeting processes are not what they should be. I personally plan to support both initiatives on the ballot. I do prefer the approach in the governor's proposal, but feel that the PTA-supported Prop 38 also has some very laudable features. One thing that I appreciate about that initiative is that the funding is encumbered to go for education, unlike with Proposition 30. And I think that that's the direction that we need to move in with the legislature, is being very, very clear with the public about where the money goes and ending some of the shell games that have impacted education for too long.
Great, thank you. Okay, Sally, again, now both of you have served in the Assembly, and currently, Mr. Hill, you're an incumbent and you're running again. This typically is smaller in comparison to the Senate districts. So we're wondering, with the new redistricting and the larger territory, how do you plan to maintain relationships with the various constituent groups?
That's a very good question. It's a difficult challenge. The state Senate districts are considerably larger than a congressional district. In California, we have, I think, 53 congressional seats and only 40 state Senate seats. So each state Senate seat is 983,000 people, or as my husband said, oh my God, that's almost 1 million. And it's a lot of geography too. But this, frankly, is, I think, it's not just district boosterism for me to say, probably the best state Senate district in California. It takes in the coast, the bay frontage on a world-class estuary. It has exciting industries. It has great independent businesses. It has major institutions like Stanford. It has everything that you would want to ask in terms of natural beauty and brain power and strong and diverse communities. It's a real experiment in bringing a little bit of everything that is California all together in one district. So it's an exciting challenge, and I think it really poses challenges for campaigning as well. Now, when you're campaigning, the overwhelming number of people in a district really would require a great deal of money to get out to each and every one. And I think what many campaigns end up doing is focusing on the always voters who are not necessarily representative of the community at large. So a big question and a big challenge to both of us is to get out to those voters that are really truly representative of the district and may not have a 100% voting record because they may not have been campaigned to before.
Thank you. As a county supervisor in San Mateo County, I represented about 750,000 people because those elections were at large. You resided within a district, but you represented the entire county because they all could vote for you or not. So I was familiar with from Pescadero to Pacifica to Brisbane to East Palo Alto. So I have a good relationship and a good knowledge of that, and that's about 65% of the new district. About 35% is in Santa Clara County. To me, what I do is, and I've kind of pride myself on this, is I'm always in the community. I have, in a week or two, a Java with Jerry, We have it once a month in a different location, usually in the morning. We'll go to a coffee shop, a local coffee shop, not a chain coffee shop. And I buy the pastries and the coffee for everyone that comes in for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and we have a nice discussion in the morning with a lot of people. And that I do in every community. Every month I just move it around the community. We have town hall meetings to reach out and talk to them. My goal is after the election, reach out with every city that I'm not familiar with, that I haven't represented before, and meet with the city council, meet with the staff, and get a thorough briefing and let them understand how we can communicate and work together better. Frankly, the way I work with the local governments, I have a cell phone. Everyone has my cell phone number. If I'm on the floor of the legislature, they call. I step off the floor and I answer that phone, because a lot of times time is important. That bill that they may be interested in comes up right then, and there's no time to wait if they go through staff and work their way around it. That's important to me, is to outreach, to be part of the community, and to go to schools, and that's another thing that I do quite often is go to schools, meet with the PTAs, meet with the staff and the principals, because it's critical that we be connected to every part of the community, and they have to be able to know who you are and how to get a hold of you and to reach you when there's a problem. So it's something that I've been used to and have represented about 750,000 people so far, so 1 million is a few more, but that's about it.
Excellent, thank you. We're going to turn to the top of education, and I'm going to incorporate one of the audience questions along with the Chamber's question. The education code and its impact on school districts is a touchy subject, as you know, especially in the context of charter schools that have so much flexibility. First, we'd like to know what your opinion on charter schools is versus the public school system, and if you could give us one example of how your own public education has shaped your view of the role of public education in the community.
Okay,
Jerry,
I think
you
it's
want to
fine.
start, please?
All right, well, public schools I'm a product of public schools. So in San Francisco, from elementary, junior high, middle school, high school, and then I went to the University of California, Berkeley, and took a little detour to the College of San Mateo for a year, and that's why I'm a strong community college supporter. Then went back to Berkeley and graduated, and then went to San Francisco State, where I have a teaching credential. From there. So I look at the education system in the master plan as the key to education. It worked in California, and the master plan is changing now, especially at the community college level, where the opportunities are not there, won't be there in the future for those who may not have a direction, may not know where they want to go and what type of education or how their life's going to form. It's going to be challenging for them to get that start and to get the classes that they need, because now what they're expecting is when you go to community college that you're focused on a goal and a driven plan. Not everybody is at that age. So it's important that we get back to those basics and do it. Where that has formed my basis, I support public education. We need public education. Charter schools have been introduced, and in many cases they've worked successfully, and I support that where they have applied and where they've worked. Some cases they haven't been successful. So I think we have to look at as they are looked on a case-by-case basis, but as we've seen, they can be successful and provide an augmentation to education in communities. But and it's important for us to not lose sight of what the basics are. And the basics are a strong, active, well-funded public education system. And that's crucial if we want to maintain the innovation economy and sustain the businesses and the growth in this area. It's crucial that we have that.
Excellent. Thank you, Jerry. Sally?
Well, my priorities in terms of charter schools are to have more accountability for charters. Charters get approved and re-upped by our county offices of education. And I don't know how many folks here have ever been to a county office of ed meeting, but even super activists that you are to be at a voter forum, it would be a little bit arcane to have been to the county office of ed. And I think that we need to put some guidelines in place for our county offices in terms of assessments of charters. We have charters, even here in our local community, that are not doing as well as schools in the district overall. And yet charters have a unique ability to take resources away from the district overall. So I think we need to put some more structure there. put some more guidelines for the county offices of ed, and be able to ensure to the public that charters are of a high quality and are making a good advantage of the resources that they're given. We also need to look at administrative salaries within our charters. We have a number of charters where the salaries for teachers are extremely low and the salaries for the administration are extremely high. And we need to be able to, again, ensure to the public that the right thing is happening with the public's resources in that regard. In terms of education overall, one of my highest priorities is to make a real change in the curriculum of public education. I would like to see public education not be so much about taking standardized tests that are not diagnostic for the students, but make them about an entrepreneurial experience in school and critical thinking and use of technology.
Thank you. We move on to some of the questions from the audience, and there's some really good ones, so I'm going to dive right in. The first one, Sally, we'll start with you. Tax credits seem to get villainized by state legislators, but they really do help businesses want to come and stay in California. What are your thoughts on having more or extended tax credits for businesses?
Well, I've carried legislation to extend tax credits that I believed were meaningful. One of the bills that I carried was to extend the life of tax credits for biotech companies that are very small and may have a product that's in the process of FDA approval but not gone completely through that process yet, and so the company isn't profitable. And other states like New Jersey, where you can drive through the state and see all the biotech companies that are located there, have extended the life of those kinds of tax credits from 10 years to 20 years so that they're usable. And they allow very small companies to sell their tax credits as an investment to larger companies. And that was something that I felt very strongly about. We have other tax credits, frankly, like the motion picture industry tax credit, that have been proven to not be effective. And we have to do a much better job of assessment of our tax credits and use them in a very strategic way. Some areas that I think would benefit from tax credits where we should put more of the emphasis that we remove from areas where it's not effective would be in the area of new energy. We need distributed, renewable, locally generated new energy, and we need a smart grid to be able to move it around the state, and we need to catch up, frankly, with Asia on battery technology, and those are all areas that are ripe for our investment. We should be much more nimble and much more thoughtful as a state in how we use the tax credits that are out there. But I do want to say that the biggest return on any investment that we could possibly make is public education.
You know, in looking at what occurs today in Sacramento, there are many corporate tax credits that are in existence. And I think it's important that we look, and there's a list, and go at each credit to determine whether that credit is worth the money that we're giving in the credit. And that has not been done. It needs an analysis to see if it really is worthwhile. There are a number of credits. The solar industry, solar installation credit in solar systems, that has driven the solar economy in California. The company that I was able to bring, SunEdison, from Baltimore, Maryland, their headquarters there, they wanted to move to Belmont, California. And they wanted to move here because this is where the opportunities are for solar, because of the tax credits that people get when they purchase them. I had legislation that was declarative of what the Board of Equalization rule was in terms of the tax credit that homeowners get. Homeowners get a tax credit if you install a solar system on your home. The credit is on your property taxes. Your home is not reassessed to the higher value because of the value of your solar system. That's an opportunity, but these tax credits need to fall to the average citizen, such as the solar credit. It needs to fall to the small business owner. Many of the corporate tax credits are for large companies. We tried to close a corporate loophole that was a credit for out-of-state companies, major companies, the single sales factor, which was trying to create that, which really benefits out-of-state manufacturers and out-of-state companies. That's a credit that we need to close and a loophole that we need to close. But to me, the point is that we have to have the credits that will filter down so that the average citizen can take advantage of them, such as the solar credit that we've seen and with some of the renewable energy credits.
Great. Jerry, let's go back to education for a second. This is another great question from our audience. What is your position on Proposition 13? Should it be overturned, and if so, how?
Well, Proposition 13 was the beginning of the downfall of public education. It has caused the tremendous problems with the funding of government, and frankly, government brought it on themselves. I mean, they deserved what they got because they did not listen to the public, and they were taking advantage of the tax rolls and the tax system before Prop 13, which led into that fight and to that measure, and that's unfortunate. The problem that we see is changing Proposition 13 now is almost impossible. It's the third rail of politics, and even if you wanted to make some corrections or changes to it, then there are some changes that could be made. As you know, previously that commercial property was about 40% of the property tax payments and residential 60%. Now it's reversed, about 60 or greater and 40% of residential. And so the corporate ownership of property can be changed in many instances without triggering a reassessment. In some cases, property can be held for decades and change hands from a corporate standpoint and not trigger that reassessment. I think we need to look for clarity in that to make sure that we're being fair with the system and that it's working properly. I don't see any chance and any change coming for Proposition 13 in the future because it has benefited people. And today, when you look at the housing market in the Valley, a lot of people, a lot of senior residents are able to stay in their home because of that. If they didn't have Proposition 13 to protect their interest in that and their property taxes, in many cases they would have to move. So I think there's a great deal of benefit, but it has been caused much of the problem that we're finding in financing, and we need to find an alternative to that by a better tax system in California that doesn't rely totally on corporate and personal income taxes.
Thank you. Sally?
Well, I believe in a split roll formula for reforms to Prop 13. I recently spoke with a mom with a family who is paying more in property taxes for her 1,200 square foot home than the Trader Joe's that took up the length of a city block. And this is exactly what some folks warned about before Prop 13 was approved by the voters, that it would turn out over time to be a big giveaway for major corporations, and it would end up impacting small businesses that are trying to buy business facilities, and especially impact homeowners over time. So I think that we need a change. It will be a tough political battle, but I think it's something that should go on the ballot for the sake of education. In particular, it's a change that we really need for California. We look at the generation that is doing pretty well now, and they had a lot of advantage that the current generation doesn't have. Young people that are growing up in California now are paying much higher fees for higher education than they were even in the year 2000, and oftentimes paying off student loans until their 50s, and then facing the fact that they may not be able to stay in the communities that they grew up in and be able to take care of aging parents because they can't afford to be here because of property taxes and the cost of housing. So I really believe in putting modifications to Prop 13 onto the ballot to make it clear that we want to protect homeowners and have more responsibility from larger parcels.
Great. It's a question on an environmental topic. Here in the 13th Senate District, there would be a lot of negative impacts of the proposal for the DMB Cargill's Salt Works development if it were allowed. They're proposing to pave over portions of the Redwood City wetlands. And the audience is wondering, what do you see as your role in the state Senate as being able to prevent environmental disasters, either this one specifically or environmental protection in general?
Well, there's a new report that just recently came out about the possibility of Katrina-style flooding of the South Bay and portions of the peninsula, and what could happen if our aging infrastructure on the Bay Delta failed in the event of a major earthquake and we had saltwater intrusion into the Delta. It's clear from that standpoint and from the standpoint of global warming that we need to preserve our bay wetlands and restore them and not pave over them. I think that the Saltworks proposal, which is to build a new city of 30,000 people and 1 million square feet of commercial space in Redwood City on a piece of land that the federal government has called Waters of the United States, is a singularly bad idea. It's exactly the wrong direction for our state. And I've been told in this campaign, it's great that you oppose that project, but it's too bad that you can't speak about it publicly. And I do speak about it publicly. I think it's very, very important to draw a very bright line to say that any restorable bay wetlands will be restored to be a part of the San Francisco Bay. We all have an interest in that to protect our communities. And now we have some of our largest business community members really coming forward, and from Cisco, that's more than 15 feet under their levees, saying that they are seeking a change and restoration of the bay. So we can't have 30,000 people put out below sea level in a place that is not accessible to mass transit. Will add 30,000 cars onto 101 and would be in exactly the wrong place. And I hope that you'll all do everything that's within your power to oppose it.
Thank you. Jerry?
Thank you. The Cargill project that was proposed was massive, was huge, and certainly had tremendous environmental impacts. And I certainly could not support that project, wouldn't support the project, and there's no project today because I believe they pulled that particular project. But more importantly, what our role is in Sacramento, and I think our responsibility to protect the California Environmental Quality Act and the environment. And just to give you an example, in the last few days of our legislative session, there was an effort brought forward to basically eviscerate the California Environmental Quality Act. It would have cut the heart out of CEQA. And that movement was moving forward by a number of people and trying to get some legs in the last few days of the session where most of the things come. It was a gut and amend bill that came forward. And when I saw that, and working with the California League of Conservation Voters, working with the Sierra Club, and in fact, I was on KQED, the forum with Michael Krasny, talking about this bill and that legislation against it and what it would do to CEQA and what it would do to our environment in the future. So I worked hard to try and get that killed, and at the end of the day, it didn't see the light of day. That's what we can do in Sacramento, is to keep our commitments, keep our focus and our priorities straight. And to me, the priority of environmental protection is crucial for California. Because again, once we lose it, once we step over that line, there's no coming back from it. We've made whatever damage we're going to do. But saying that, there are also reforms that are necessary with the California Environmental Quality Act. There are changes and things that need to be done on a piecemeal basis, because in many cases it is being used not for environmental protection, but it is being used for competitive, corporate, in some cases commercial attacks and benefits that way, by some members suing other people and companies, which is not right. We need to be able to improve that.
Thank you.
and reform that.
This has been proposed by a couple of folks in our audience tonight. In your time as an elected official, how have you demonstrated your ability to work across the aisle to solve the state's problems? And if you could give us at least one specific example of maybe a very contentious situation where you were able to work across the aisle.
Well, I've been very fortunate, and I think, as I mentioned, 95% of my legislation has been on a bipartisan basis. So there have been many bills that I've worked on and successfully brought forward and built that ability to bring collaboration and consensus on that legislation. To look at one specific bill, we worked hard a couple of years ago on the National Popular Vote Bill. It was interesting because it started out with everyone in a bipartisan manner with a number of Republican co-authors. And at the end of the day, it didn't end that way because the Republicans felt that they were not supportive of that bill. So that's not a good example of the bipartisan. But what it shows is the ability that I've had to bring people on board, to discuss, to collaborate, to involve themselves in the discussion of legislation and the issues that are important. In one bill that we've had is legislation to eliminate the duplicative regulatory aspect on the bio-life sciences industry in California. Right now, the Federal Food and Drug Administration does their normal inspections. They come in regularly and inspect those. Followed right on their heels is the Food and Drug Branch from California, conducting the same inspection, taking more time, costing more money for the businesses, and which really takes away from the money that should be spent for research and development and the time that they spend for that. My legislation in that case was bipartisan, because in some cases it's not necessarily the Republicans or whichever side, it's to bring people together on the issue, and I was able to get a full bipartisan support on that legislation and to pass it out of the legislature, and it's actually sitting on the governor's desk today.
Thank you. Sally?
Well, it's interesting. If you watch debate in Sacramento in the committees and on the floor, I think it's easy to talk about bipartisanship, but to have 95% of a bill record be bipartisan, it indicates to me that those are not strong bills. And in Sacramento, I really pursued authors' bills, not the sponsored bills that were written by lobbyists and handed off to legislators. And there were bills that we had that were bipartisan and often in a very surprising way. I did a lot of work on the criminal justice system, not because I particularly wanted to deal with issues of the prisons in California, but because I've seen the fact that our spending on prisons has so overtaken our spending on education to the point that we're now spending more on our prisons than we are on higher education. And on some of those bills, I oftentimes couldn't get my fellow Democrats to support it, but could get Republican support on certain human rights questions and on questions of innocence determination in criminal proceedings. And so it's something that's possible to do. I think it's a good goal to shoot for. But the fact is that as elected officials, we're there to really argue the bills and to see them refined in the process, not to get along on every single question.
Great. Thank you. You already had a chance, right? Okay, we're down to the last question, and it's a pity because I have a great stack of questions from the audience, but the one I really like to hear is, if you are elected to the Senate, at the end of your term, what is the single achievement that you'd be most proud to bear your signature? What's your greatest accomplishment you would like to have leaving? Sally?
I'd like to be able to say at the end of 8 years that I was able to make a change in Proposition 98, our law in California that guarantees minimum funding for education, and yet is so easy for the legislature to suspend, that education has been cheated out of billions of dollars over the past several years. I'd like to have it be the case that we have a really good grip on getting rid of toxic chemicals from consumer products and from the environment. And I'd like to have it be the case that every child in California had access to a world-class education. We have now more than a quarter of California's children growing up in poverty, and that's a situation that I think we really need to turn around. And there are so many public policy questions that don't have moneyed interests behind them. So I call them orphaned issues. They're neglected in a system that's dominated by too much money. And if I'm elected, I plan to go after every single impactful orphaned issue that I can possibly find and make a change in it.
Thank you. Jerry?
One of the most important things that I've been working on for the last 2 years and want to continue working on in the Senate, and for me a success in that is to make sure that no one anywhere in California suffers what the city of San Bruno suffered 2 years ago. No one should have to put themselves through that, nor should we have a utility that subjected its customers and the citizens of California to the negligence, to the diversion of funds from safety, to profits and bonuses for executives. And it only takes, and it requires the vigilance of a legislator to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And frankly, I'm the person that's been doing that. I have the knowledge because of what I've learned over the last 2 years. I knew nothing about it before. But this is crucial and this is life-saving. That to me, if I can, after 8 years or 4 years, depending how long it is, say that we have a safe infrastructure in our utilities, then that would say a lot for me. And the other issue for me that would be important is if we take our budget in California, we change the tax structure so that we have an even revenue stream coming in rather than so dependent on corporate and personal income taxes, so that we have performance-based budgeting, so that we know what the programs are successful and those that are not, and those that are failing and that we shouldn't fund them any longer, and that we have a reserve and a rainy day fund, because we don't have one today, didn't have one before. And when I came to office in 2008, and we had to cut over $40 billion in the next 2 years from the state budget, because from 2002 to 2008, they increased spending from about $76 billion to $100 billion. And it's important that we not do that we be responsible and that we manage our money appropriately and that we put the right checks and balances in place so that we don't spend it. And those are the items that would be important for me at the end of my term.
Thank you both. We're at the final phase of the forum for this portion of the evening. You both get 2 minutes for a closing statement. Jerry, if you'd like to...
Sure.
Final comments?
First of all, thank you for this opportunity. Again, thank you for all of you for being here this evening. I appreciate you spending the time. You know, I'm committed to a number of things in Sacramento. One is committed to protecting our environment. And as I mentioned a minute ago, protecting us from the neglect and the actions of Pacific Gas and Electric Company. Also, it's important for me to sustain our innovative economy and maintain the balance that creates the quality of life that we have, because we need that innovation. We need those good jobs, high-paying jobs, to really sustain what we have and the quality of life that we enjoy in the Valley. So that's important, too. I want to protect that quality of life and also, when it comes to the budget in Sacramento, to make the tough choices that are necessary to balance the budget. And one thing that was important to me, when I started in the legislature in 2009, when we made the first cuts to salaries of state employees, I cut my salary by 20%. I'm the lowest paid assembly member in Sacramento because of that. And that's important to me, that we be responsible and act responsibly. I have the education, UC Berkeley, teaching credential from San Francisco State. I have the experience as a small business owner, as a city council member, mayor, county supervisor, assembly member. And I have the track record of success. I think you just have to look at the website I have, and you can see the success that I have. And I have the relationships to be successful and to be a productive state senator and a successful state senator. To me, the success is fighting for against PG&E, fought big oil, fought homelessness, fought in San Francisco over their local hire ordinance and their toll roads that they wanted to create. But probably more importantly, it's the relationships I've built. And here's a list of the endorsements that I've been able to gain. These are people I've worked with over the years, and they've worked with all of us. They've worked with both of us. From Governor Jerry Brown to Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, the list goes on. Steve Wesley, Commissioner Dave Jones, Tom Torlakson, Public Instruction, and Senator Joe Simidian, Leland Yee, Mark Leno, and all of them. I'm honored by this list, and I'd be honored to have your name on this list as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally?
I just want to once again thank the Chamber for putting this forum on. I feel like we got a lot of substantive questions out, and I hope that the Chamber will forward the questions that didn't get asked to us. And I think I could speak for my competitor in saying that we'd love to put the answers up on our websites and have the opportunity to answer your question if it wasn't one that we got to tonight. And I want to thank each of you for being here. It's a special year. It's an impactful year. And we didn't get a chance to touch on the propositions. I hope that you will take a look at the League of Women Voters recommendations in terms of the state propositions. And I know that each person here has the potential to reach out to the people that are in your network and to have them reach the people that are in their network to tell them how critically important it is to be informed as a voter and to vote in this very, very important year. I obviously feel that there are issues that are very impactful for the future of California. I would say that number one amongst those is education, and a co-number one or a very close behind number two would be the environment. I've been a little bit chided in this race for saying that we need to have the really long view and not just think about how do we get through this year, how do we get through the next 3 months, but look at the next 50 years, the next 100 years. What kind of a state do we want California to be? It's clear to me, and I'm sure it's clear to you, that California is an example to the whole world about how people with differences can live together, can thrive, can create things and ways of doing things that change the world. And we need to uphold that here in California. So I want to thank each of you for being here tonight. I'd be honored if you'd sign up for our news coming from our campaign and really take an active part in this election. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you to both of the candidates, and thank you, too, to the members of our audience for your wonderful questions, which, as at the suggestion of the candidates, we'll see if we can get some answers to those as well. We hope that you're able to stay for the second half of the forum. We're going to meet the candidates for the Assembly, and that will begin at 7:45. So you have a quick chance to go out, stretch your legs, and we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes. Thank you both for coming
Thank you
this
very
evening.
much, Cynthia.